Tyler lifted my father's crystal tumbler like he'd earned the right to it. To the future, he shouted, sloshing 20-year-old single malt that didn't belong to him. The old cabin glowed under firelight. The stone hearth snapped and popped while cedar beams threw long shadows that danced like ghosts across the walls. This place had stood longer than any of us, longer than Tyler's attention span, longer than his marriage to my sister, longer than every promise he'd ever made and broken. I just got the last permits approved this morning, he declared, chest puffed out, voice loud enough to drown out doubt. We tear out all this outdated junk, install glass walls, heated floors, modern finishes. By spring, we flip it. 780 grand in pure profit. My father laughed and clapped him on the shoulder, pride radiating off him like heat from the fire. Sarah stared at her husband as if he'd just invented something remarkable. I stayed seated in the corner, fingers wrapped around a mug of cold coffee, silent, because none of them knew the truth. The deed to this cabin wasn't framed on a wall or filed in a bank vault. It was locked inside a fireproof safe in my apartment 3 hours away. And my name had been printed on it for 5 years? Inside the cabin, the celebration swelled. But it wasn't joy I was hearing. It was relief. To my father, Tyler's vision wasn't just ambition. It was rescue. A way to transform a stagnant inheritance into something shiny and impressive. He saw Tyler's tailored suit and booming voice and mistook volume for value. When he looked at me in my gray sweater with my quiet posture, he saw nothing. Just Ashley, the accountant. No vision. No spark. No worth. My phone vibrated once against my leg. Sharp. Intentional. I checked it discreetly. The message read, "Are you Ashley? I'm Antonio. I'm outside your cabin. Your brother-in-law owes me $18,000. My stomach dropped. My expression didn't change. Forensic accounting teaches you one sacred rule. Never react before the trap is ready. I stood without a word, slipped through the French doors, and stepped onto the porch. The mountain air hit hard, cold enough to burn. Snow fell thick and slow, swallowing the forest in white silence. Through the glass behind me, I watched my father pour Tyler another drink. Sarah leaned into her husband, laughing at something he said. A perfect family portrait, held together by a lie, and standing there in the freezing dark. It forced a question I'd avoided for years. Why? Why did my father trust the loudest man in the room and overlook the one who kept everything from falling apart? Families like mine fall into this pattern easily. We confuse confidence with competence, noise with substance, silence with insignificance. Tyler performed success. I maintained stability. I solved problems quietly, paid debts invisibly, made disasters disappear before anyone noticed them. And because I never demanded credit, my father assumed there had never been danger at all. I typed my reply into the cold night air. I'm outside, coming down. I wasn't just meeting a contractor. I was stepping out of the role they'd written for me. The quiet daughter clocked out. The forensic accountant clocked in. The next morning, I sat in the only diner in town, watching steam curl off a cup of black coffee. The windows were fogged with condensation, and the smell of bacon and burnt toast hung in the air like a memory. Antonio arrived 2 minutes late. His eyes were sunken, his shoulders heavy. He carried a thick manila folder like it weighed more than paper ever should. He slid into the booth across from me and pushed his phone toward me without greeting. He wanted an open concept, Antonio said flatly. So we started demolition yesterday. The photo on the screen stole the air from my lungs. The great room was gone. The hand-hewn beams my mother used to trace with her fingers, while reading by the fire, had been ripped out and tossed into a dumpster like scrapwood. Tyler hadn't renovated the cabin. He'd erased it. The anger that settled in my chest wasn't explosive. It was glacial. The kind of cold that preserves everything until the moment of reckoning. I pulled my own folder from my bag and placed it between us on the sticky diner table. Antonio, I said calmly, Tyler Collins does not own that cabin. He never has. I slid the deed across the table toward him. I do. His eyes widened as he read the date. 5 years ago. When my mother died, I continued. My father stopped opening his mail. Grief froze him. The bank was weeks from foreclosure. Sarah and Tyler were too busy living loudly to notice the house was drowning in debt. I didn't tell him about emptying my savings account, or clearing the arrears that had accumulated over months of neglect, or transferring the title quietly to protect it from creditors who were circling like vultures. I protected their happiness from the shadows for half a decade, and Tyler repaid me by tearing down my walls. He lied to you, I said. He damaged my property. You're stopping work immediately, and you're giving me every message he's ever sent you. Antonio swallowed hard. He owes me $18,000. He owes you more than that, I said. But right now, he's about to learn something important. The landlord is home. I drove down the mountain with evidence riding shotgun, my mind shifting from defense to offense. But before I moved against Tyler directly, I owed my sister one chance. Sarah wasn't malicious. She was hopeful. Dangerously, blindly hopeful. I needed to know if she was complicit in this scheme or just collateral damage. She arrived at the cafe glowing, manic optimism practically buzzing around her like static electricity. Can you believe this? She said, gripping my hands across the small table. Tyler says the pre-sale interest is insane. We're finally going to be rich. I pulled my hands back slowly. Sarah, he's destroying the cabin. She waved it off like I'd mentioned a minor inconvenience. He's modernizing it. It's just old wood. It's not his wood, I said quietly. And he hasn't paid the contractor. He owes $18,000. Her smile cracked at the edges, then hardened into something defensive. You're so risk-averse, she snapped. You wouldn't understand vision. I understand forged permits, I replied. And I understand he doesn't own the property he's tearing apart. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Why can't you just be happy for us? Why do you always have to find problems? Then she said the words that turned my concern into ice. We took out a second mortgage. She said proudly. Tyler said we needed skin in the game to show the investors we're serious. I stared at her. She'd gambled her children's home on a lie, on a man who couldn't tell the truth if his life depended on it. He lied to you, I said softly. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. You're jealous. You've always been jealous. Stay out of our way. She walked out without looking back. I stayed in my seat, coffee growing cold in front of me, because this wasn't about a cabin anymore. It was about stopping my sister from losing everything she had. I didn't go home to cry. I went home to work at my dining table, surrounded by the quiet hum of my apartment. I opened databases most people don't know exist. Financial records, credit reports, court filings, the digital footprints that people like Tyler assume no one will ever follow. They thought Ashley, the accountant, was harmless. A woman with spreadsheets and sensible shoes. Someone to overlook. Someone to dismiss. They were about to learn that accounting isn't just a job title. It's a weapon. I ran Tyler Collins through every system I could access. The results bled red across my screen. Unsecured. Debt totaling $57,600. And that was just the beginning. The debt wasn't subtle. It was reckless. Desperate. Maxed out credit cards from 6 different banks. Online gambling accounts bleeding cash every week. A luxury car lease that screamed success to everyone who saw it while quietly strangling him. With payments he couldn't afford. Tyler was making minimum payments on everything. Shuffling balances like a street hustler running a shell game. He wasn't managing money. He was stalling collapse. And when drowning people panic, they don't grab ropes. They grab people. My sister wasn't his partner. She was his flotation device. That second mortgage on Sarah's house wasn't a growth strategy. It was oxygen. He'd burned through their equity covering losses, and now the cabin flip wasn't about profit. It was about survival. I printed everything. Bankruptcy filings from 2014 that he'd never mentioned. A failed LLC with a tax lien still attached. A history of charm followed by wreckage in every city he'd lived. Charisma didn't erase patterns. It only hid them temporarily. But paper trails alone wouldn't stop him fast enough. Civil cases take time. Lawsuits crawl through courts for months. And Tyler was actively tearing apart my property every day if I wanted him removed immediately. Physically and permanently. I needed evidence of criminal intent, not incompetence. Theft. I grabbed my coat. The audit was done. It was time to see what he'd touched. The mountain road curled upward under fresh snow, my tires crunching through the silence. The drive felt longer than usual. Every mile gave me more time to process what I'd learned about the man my sister married. He wasn't just dishonest. He was predatory. The cabin was dark when I arrived. Antonio had done exactly what I told him. Tools gone. Site abandoned. The front door stood unlocked, swinging slightly in the wind. Tyler never worried about locks. He assumed ownership was a feeling rather than a legal fact. Inside, the air smelled like dust and destruction. Studs exposed where walls used to stand. Drywall stripped and scattered. Debris everywhere I stepped. I didn't linger in the ruins of the great room. I went straight to the master bedroom, to the wall above the fireplace where my mother's painting had always hung. The painting was gone from the wall, leaning against the exposed framework. Behind where it had hung, the wall-safe door stood open, empty, my breath stalled in my chest. I stepped closer, my boots echoing on the bare subfloor. The velvet-lined compartments inside the safe had been stripped clean, my mother's jewelry. The sapphire brooch she wore on her wedding day. The pearls passed down through 3 generations of women in our family. The gold locket with my father's photograph. Inside that she never took off until the day she died. Gone. All of it. I leaned against the cold stone fireplace. As nausea rolled through me, this wasn't fraud anymore. This was felony theft, and suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't just about money. Tyler didn't steal those pieces because he needed $57,000. He stole them because he couldn't tolerate being ordinary. Because losing meant becoming invisible, and he'd rather commit crimes than admit failure. This is what narcissistic collapse looks like. When the illusion cracks, they don't downsize. They don't humble themselves. They loot. They steal symbols. They wear other people's history like a costume to keep pretending they belong among winners. He pawned my mother's legacy to buy champagne optics and fake momentum. He chose crime over humility. Destruction over truth. There was no coming back from that. I photographed the empty safe from every angle. Then I called the sheriff. I need to report a burglary, I said, my voice steady as stone. And I know exactly who did it. The sister who hesitated at the cafe was gone. What stood in that empty room was resolve.